This is LBC News.
Let's have a chat about electric vehicles, because we might be seeing a lot more charging points on the side of the road over the next few years. The government's announced plans to install 100,000 of them across England by 2030. Ministers hope it'll help people who don't have their own driveways or charging points make the switch to an EV. Let's speak live to automotive journalist Quentin Willson, who's the founder of Fair Charge, which campaigns for electric vehicles. Quentin, 100,000 sounds a lot. Is that enough to meet the demand, do we think?
Well, estimates say that we need to have 300,000 chargers across the UK by 2030. We've already got 100,000 connections, so this extra 100,000 helps, but we need to keep going. At the moment, one charger goes into the ground every 29 minutes, so we're going in the right direction, and this is great news. But there are other things that government could be doing that are very simple. Like, for instance, we have no signage on roads to tell people where the existing infrastructure is. So if you want to convince people who haven't bought electric cars that an infrastructure does exist, something as simple as that would be a no-brainer, in my opinion. Treasury isn't helping either. They put 20% VAT on public charging. So if you're charging by the roadside on those new chargers, you'll be charged 20% VAT compared to 5% at home. So that needs changing as well. And then they've got this thing called the expensive car supplement on vehicle excise duty. So if you buy an EV with an original cost of over £40,000, it's going to cost you £620 per year to tax that electric car. So these aren't incentives for people to change their behaviour. They're disadvantages. So Treasury needs to get with the programme, wake up and say, if you want to encourage adoption, let's make some small changes to taxation policy.
Let's talk about the charge points specifically. It's going to be, well, by 2030, that's another 5 years away. Do you think we can wait that long?
Well, we need them as quickly as we can, but, you know, there's economies of scale to be able to do this. Most people who drive an electric car charge at home. That's 80% of people, so they're quite happy. But as we get to mass adoption, we're really going to have to start pushing these out. But 5 years is not long, and you know, we're one of the most successful countries in Europe when it comes to EV sales, so it's actually doing quite well.
So in terms of encouragement, you mentioned the small changes that could be made, because I feel for a lot of people, EVs are still a bit of a black hole, and there may be a little bit of trepidation about making that switch because they quite simply don't know enough about them.
This is another issue that government really needs to confront, and that is an information campaign where people who own EVs tell normal drivers that there's nothing to be afraid of. You've got 1.5 million EVs running around the country. People have happily folded them into their lives, but that messaging isn't going across, and you've got all these old myths. 5 years ago, people thought batteries died, when we know that they're lasting up to 20 years and beyond. So getting that information across, and I would say to anybody listening to this who's worried about buying an EV, running an EV, used or new, just ask an EV driver, because all those people who drive them, all the surveys say they would never go back to combustion.
Let me just read the Future of Roads Minister statement, Lillian Greenwood, saying this government's powering up the EV revolution by rolling out a charge point every 29 minutes, and our support to roll out over 100,000 local charge points in England shows that we are committed to making even more progress. But Quentin, from the industry point of view, is there enough confidence in the government and politicians that they're really behind the switch to electric vehicles?
Do you know what would make us all feel really, really confident about politicians and government being behind it is if we saw them driving electric cars, which they don't. And, you know, I think the whole cabinet should be made to drive an electric car and be seen to be driving them and give us their feedback. Because if you don't drive these things, then it's an abstract concept. I remember being in the Treasury talking to their VAT team about lowering the VAT and said, anybody here got an electric car? Not a single hand went up. So that's a really important factor, that we need to have politicians who talk about this stuff physically driving these cars.
There we go. That's a good question for whenever a politician comes on and talks about this in the future on LBC News. We'll be asking, well, have you got one yourself? Quentin, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
That is Quentin Willson, automotive journalist and also the founder of Fair Charge. The time is 11:55 across the UK.
Weather.